Morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. This webinar will begin shortly. Before it does, I'm going to take a few moments to tell you some housekeeping notes as we get started. The first is that the webinar is being recorded. We will share the link afterward along with the link to the last session. You are joining in listening only mode, and the chat is disabled, but please use the Q&A box throughout the webinar, anonymously if you wish, to ask questions or to upvote other questions you'd like answered. There will be a time for Q&A at the end. Because you are in listen only mode, we really do care about relationships and who's here. So we'd love the chance to meet you and tell you more about Homeground Lab and learn about how this work resonates with you. So if you would like to do that, we'll really just have the equivalent of like a moving into the hallway coffee chat following the webinar. There will be a separate Zoom link that I will put in the chat momentarily, and I'll link it again at the end. So we'd love if you can stick around and join us for that. So I am Stephanie Acker, one of the co-founders of Homeground Lab, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to today's facilitator, my co-founder, Dr. Devora Newmark. Dr. Newmark is an interdisciplinary artist researcher with over 30 years experience in bridging creative practice, policy, and scholarship. Their PhD research, titled Radical Beauty for Troubled Times, Involuntary Displacement, and the Unmaking of Home, examined the role that house beautification plays for individuals coming to terms with the traumas associated with involuntary dislocation. Dr. Newmark served as a forced migration and refugee study fellow at the Center for Human Rights Erlangen-Nuremberg, where they explored the aesthetic dimensions of refugee housing in Germany. Currently, Dr. Newmark is a visiting scholar in the Department of Sustainability and Social Justice at Clark University and holds certifications in climate change adaptation and emergency management. All of this informs Dr. Newmark's conviction that beauty is essential infrastructure in displacement contexts. Devora, over to you to start the webinar.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, and welcome all to the second session of our webinar series, Beauty, Art, Belonging, and the Neuroscience of Place. The webinar series examines how beauty, art, and design intersect with neuroscience, dignity, and resilience, especially in contexts of displacement, housing insecurity, and humanitarian response. From refugee camps in post-disaster neighborhoods to communities painting their way back to feeling a sense of belonging, we're exploring a radical truth. Beauty in the built environment is not a luxury, it is infrastructure. This series is co-hosted by Clark University's Integration and Belonging Hub and Homeground Lab. I want to thank Dr. Anita Fabos, the Hub's convener, for her partnership in making these conversations possible. Homeground Lab advances aesthetics as infrastructure in displacement contexts, working at the intersection of research, community-led practice, and policy to transform how humanitarian and disaster response supports dignity, belonging, and healing. We are delighted that Dawn Ruggles, Minar Thapa Magar, and Anna Carolina Elena are joining us for this session titled Designing for Belonging: What Neuroscience Teaches Us About Shelter, Space, and Healing. So let's get started with an intro to our first speaker, Dawn Ruggles. Dawn is the CEO Emeritus of Ruggles Mabe Studio in Denver, producer of Built Beautiful, and author of Beauty, Neuroscience, and Architecture: Timeless Patterns and Their Impact on Our Well-Being. He serves as Director of Classical Studies at CU Denver and co-founded the Design Health Initiative. It is such a pleasure to introduce you. Over to you, Dawn.
Well, thank you, Devora, and I'm really honored to be on this panel with such remarkable professionals. That infrastructure that you're talking about is actually commonalities that run from one human being to another, and it has to do with our nervous system. So the title of my presentation today is Beauty in the Built Environment: Leveraging Human Biology for Aesthetic Well-Being. This is an encapsulation of a chapter co-authored by Natalie Ricci and myself that's part of the recently published Routledge Handbook of Neuroscience for the Built Environment. The intricate relationship between beauty, design harmony, and our biological responses plays a crucial role in shaping aesthetic preference and promoting overall health. By examining the neurological and physiological mechanisms underlying these interactions, we can uncover how design choices directly influence well-being, offering a pathway to environments that not only enhance health, but actively prevent disease. So to get started today, I'll give you a brief definition of beauty and harmony as it applies to today's subject. Harmony is the neurological expression of order, the brain's experience of patterns that conforms to its evolutionary expectations for coherence, proportion, and balance. When harmony is present, perception becomes effortless, emotions become positive, and the experience is recognized as beauty. This is especially true in design. It all starts with how our brains process neurological inputs. Our brains are taxed with processing 11 million bits of information per second. And the only way to process that amount of data efficiently is to process it as pattern types and quickly categorize the information. Now, there are two pattern types that I will initially focus on today, and those are exciting patterns and beautiful patterns. Well, these two pattern types are connected to two deeper and more fundamental neurological responses. And those are the emotions of survival and pleasure. At the most fundamental level, humankind is genetically predisposed to seek two things: survival and pleasure. Every day, our bodies process billions of actions without us being even slightly aware of it, and all of them are geared towards these two goals. An amazing 95% of all of our actions are processed by our brain and brain's intuitive and subconscious, and all are geared to survival and pleasure. Well, here are 4 examples of how we process pattern types and put them into these categories. This is an example of a harmonious, beautiful pleasure geometric pattern that our brains can easily process, which translates into efficient, stress-free processing. It is stress-free because the geometry is coherent and non-threatening, and the scene can be efficiently processed by our brain. Nothing here is initiating a survival reaction. This is composed of a clear sky, trickling water, natural materials to walk on, and the broad view of the ocean beyond. Plus, all of these patterns are supported by a bilateral symmetrical composition, making this a pleasure to experience. Incidentally, notice the birds on the plaza. Birds are a key indicator of safety and approachability. Well, here we have another expression of harmony and beauty. Set in a biophilic scene, composed with uniform geometry, built from natural materials and graced with a layer of snow, this scene engenders a sense of relief and acceptance. We approach easily and without fear. Well, here's an architectural image that contains both pattern types: an exciting survival geometric pattern and a beautiful harmony pleasure geometric pattern. Well, notice how the survival pattern of the new construction overwhelms the pleasure pattern of the original building as your subconscious struggles to reconcile and make sense of these forms. The geometry types here are discordant and conflicting, and as a result, our brain is stressed to place these patterns into categories that it has been tuned to know. This is neurologically inefficient and stressful. This scene, normally a table full of food and wine and cheese in a meadow adjacent to a body of water, would be a strong pleasure pattern. Yet the lightning has turned this into a survival pattern that dominates the pleasure pattern. The purpose of showing these last 2 slides is to show how survival patterns overwhelms pleasure patterns. Neuroscientists theorize that the processing of survival patterns is actually 5 to 7 times stronger than pleasure patterns. Why is it so much stronger? Because our brains evolved to protect us first and then look for pleasure later. Well, this brings me to another step in aligning our neurological processing with exciting and beautiful. I've been discussing subconscious neurological processing, and the brain has to have inputs to process, and those are provided by our nervous system. And because the discussion is dealing with subconscious processing, then it is the autonomic nervous system that we're dealing with here. And the autonomic nervous system is made up of two very important and inseparable streams of information, those being sympathetic and parasympathetic inputs. And these streams of information directly affect our health and sense of well-being, both positively and negatively. Well, sympathetic inputs are considered survival inputs, and they align with exciting. And conversely, parasympathetic inputs are considered pleasure inputs, and they align with beautiful, as shown in this graphic. Well, following from that, there are some very important health attributes to be aware of here. Regarding sympathetic inputs, which aligns with exciting and survival, it's known as fight or flight or freeze reaction. Major characteristics of a sympathetic event are stress and anxiety. An event like this initiates raised heart rate, elevated blood pressure, and narrows your mental focus. So sympathetic inputs not only can make us feel ill, they are a downward pull on our general health and sense of well-being. Now, regarding parasympathetic inputs, which again aligns with beauty and pleasure, it's known as rest and relaxation. The major characteristics of a parasympathetic event are calming, stress relieving, and feeling a sense of well-being. An event such as this lowers your heart rate, lowers your blood pressure, optimizes critical functions in immunity. That's really, really important, especially inflammation, and cell repair. And it expands your mental focus and generally creates a sense of well-being. So parasympathetic inputs not only make us feel good, they boost the general state of our health. Well, this information led to biology and psychology. A healthy nervous system achieves balance when the flow of sympathetic and parasympathetic inputs is in balance, and it's known as homeostasis. Really important point in living a healthy life. A life that's all sympathetic and stressful is out of balance, as we know. And likewise, a life that's all parasympathetic and pleasure is equally out of balance. So here's the key point. Stress makes us stronger, and pleasure mitigates the negative components of stress. It's literally a balancing act where one input complements the other. A good example would be a stressful day at work, followed by relaxing in a favorite chair and enjoying a beautiful view, thus allowing your nervous system to rebalance. Well, applying the same balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic to design, we have this diagram indicating the importance of the utilization of design patterns that generate both sympathetic and parasympathetic reactions. Concisely, this advocates that it is essential that both exciting and beautiful elements be combined in a design to achieve the proper balance to reinforce health and well-being. Now, keep in mind, as discussed earlier, sympathetic inputs are much stronger than parasympathetic, so it doesn't take many of those inputs to properly balance the equation. So to summarize, in the silent dialogue between our biology and the spaces we inhabit lies the blueprint for well-being or decline. The environments we create are not mere backdrops to our lives. They are active participants in the narrative of our health. Poorly designed spaces devoid of natural harmony can amplify stress and erode the delicate balance that sustains us. Conversely, environments that resonate with our biological rhythms offers more comfort. They serve as essential allies in the pursuit of health, subtly orchestrating the physiological harmony necessary for resilience and recovery. So as we look forward now, the imperative is clear. Design must evolve beyond aesthetics to become a crucial mediator of human health. In closing, I will say when someone says your work is beautiful or harmonious, you should take a moment to reflect on the fact that you are improving their health and well-being at that very moment. Harmony and beauty do matter to our lives, and neuroscience has opened the door for us to understand that more clearly. Let's take advantage of that to make the world a better and healthier place. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Dawn. I have seen your slides before and I've heard you speak, and every time I speak, I learn. Every time I hear you speak, I learn more. So much appreciated. There's so much that we could unpack together, and I look forward to the Q&A. So for everybody who is listening, please put your comments and questions for Dawn in the Q&A box so that we can have a robust conversation after we've heard from the next two speakers.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so it's my pleasure now to introduce you to Minar Thapa Magar, who is the National Coordinator for the Sindh Housing Recovery and Reconstruction Platform, supporting the government of Sindh, Pakistan in rebuilding 2.1 million homes and recovering 50,000 settlements following the devastating flooding in 2022. As technical advisor at the Catholic Relief Services, Minar brings over a decade of experience in disaster recovery and risk reduction, with expertise in shelter, housing, and settlement-led approaches. Over to you, Minar.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to hear you, Don. Today, I'll be sharing my experience from Pakistan, more about how the community themselves are uptaking the beauty in the reconstruction process, and how we are trying to engage community in terms of design and delivering post-disaster reconstruction, large-scale post-disaster reconstruction in Pakistan. My name is Minar, and I'd like to share the experience from Sindh, starting with the context. In 2022, there was a massive flood where more than 2.1 million houses were damaged and more than 50,000 settlements were affected. The entire Sindh was flooded, where more than 1/3 of Sindh, the province of Pakistan, was underwater for almost 3 months. Looking into this devastation need, I'd like to focus ourselves into one village called Kamangar, where Sabreen Bibi, she has been building her house over the years with her daughter. At this point, she had to see her roof being carried away by the flood, destroyed by the flood. And that was also a part where all the communities were being hopeless in during this aftermath of 2022 floods. As part of the reconstruction strategy, CRS, together with the government, we started working to identify resilient construction techniques, and then to define a minimum construction standards for flood resilient homes to be rebuilt in Sindh. While coming up with this reconstruction guidelines, we were trying to find the solutions for different typologies like stone, mud, brick, timber, and also packaging it in a mason training curriculum and handbook to train the masons. And today, at this date, more than 1 million homes are already being constructed by the people themselves as the part of owner-driven reconstruction approach, where people are rebuilding their homes with a minimum support from the government and the partners. I would like to take this picture where the grandma in this picture is holding um, a cloth called rulli, which is multi-purpose cloth that is used for sitting. And this cloth is also used for roof covering. This cloth is also used for blanket, and it has a lot of purpose. And it's like it is inherited kind of pattern and the connection with this kind of cloth in Sindh, which is very unique to Sindh, as it's part of the Sindhi tradition. So local culture, pattern, and style is sense of cohesion and ownership that we have seen within the communities. With just little cash support, around $1,000 and little more, and with some skills, how to build and how to construct the house to be resilient, and little bit orientations and working together with the people are rebuilding their dreams. They're not just rebuilding the houses, but they are putting a lot of their feelings, their beauty into the structures, um, um, considering it as their part of belonging, their sense of belonging. During this process, when we talked with one mason who have built 25 houses based on these minimum guidelines, he felt very proud, and he was very confident that the houses that he is building in this process is safe, and all the families feel safer during floods or during rains that happens every year in Sindh. When these constructions were happening and when the houses are being completed, people were turning it into homes by adopting the same Raleigh patterns, their Sindhi patterns into the house by coloring it by themselves with red, blue, yellow. You can see different designs, different patterns, stitching it to the house. And when few of the houses started this, it was like a wildfire. Entire people in Sindh who were rebuilding were painting their house, marking it, stamping with their belongingness, with their feeling, and that was the total sense of ownership and resilience. We could also see that people who had lost everything, they felt that now it's not just their homes, but it's their hope which is alive. When they see these colorful walls, they see it as their future being rebuilt with dignity and culture, which was lost after the flood. Uh, and this is the story that is continuing as part of the beautiful resistance. And today, as I said, more than 1 million homes are already being reconstructed with different colors, different shapes, different designs, all done by the people without any hands out, without any support. And it's all part of their marking of belonging. At the same time, while we were looking into beauty into built environment, it was not just the house. We could see there were this kind of kitchens nearby the house, developed by the woman especially who spends a lot of time in this kitchen. We're creating the craft and art with a small patterns through mud architectures. They were putting it there, and they were marking it to be beautiful. And we often hear the quote that I like to organize my kitchen, like I like to mark my space in my own way. And you can see different patterns being observed with different houses. There were some changes we noticed and observed during the process where people used to cook openly. Now they have kind of a closed kitchen, again marked with colors, different patterns. You can see in this picture how they build their kitchen in front of their house where they felt appropriate. And they are marking with small paintings, their feelings. And these markings are done by women themselves, especially their children's working together with them to define their color, define their identity in this small built-up structures. Um, while while we were supporting people to rebuild, we also were very clear that housing alone was not enough. So we explored a settlement approach, like kind of a tool for a holistic multi-sectoral recovery process to bring people together to identify their needs within the settlement, to identify the future plan they would like to develop in those settlements. And it was all led by the communities. And this was the first time this kind of holistic recovery process was happening after 2022 floods. There has been an incident of flood in 2010, 2012, 2015, but this was the first time communities was looking into a holistic picture of recovery process. And often in this kind of a large scale disaster, there is always a challenge to engage communities. There is always a challenge to support them to design their houses as well as their communities because of the high pressure from donor, high political pressure, and fast demand of solutions or fast demand because of the urgent need from the communities. So we tried our level best to facilitate and engage the community to unlock their potential. And once our engineers and architects and social officers were working with the communities, they had um, so much of creativity and potential to plan the existing settlements, design, and also dream, which was the major element of motivation for all of us, including the community. You can see the same rally patterns where they're sitting there doing multiple things. And while we were looking into settlement, it's a macro level view. So we had to go into a neighborhood-based planning, and we had to sit with the communities and then to sketch the actual socio-economic, socio-cultural dynamics of the settlements. So we started sketching together with the community. We used black color ink to reflect what is existing on the ground. And then we started marking it with red color. You can see in the settlement that what are the new additional needs, like street lights, latrines, hand pumps, kitchens. Those are the new things, and it also guided us like where to place those infrastructures, how it is going to blend with the existing socio cultural dynamics that within those neighborhoods. Uh, and during this process, we also tried our best to engage with women, children, and different diverse group of community. We did one exercise with children to engage them in designing the open space. So we started with blank paper, different color pencils, and then with the question, how do you imagine the new play area that is going to be built in this village? So it's kind of a focus art group session with the children, and we were so much excited with what they started drawing their own imaginations, pouring it to the paper, and then started guiding us like how their new play area or multi-purpose open space should be. When we put all of their drawings together, then we started identifying patterns. Some were also referred by Don. So we were looking into significance of those patterns. It was so collective aspirations to look that most of the context, cultural relevance were bringing it together, and it was kind of a psychological insights where we could see similar patterns are being expressed by the children. It was promoting inclusivity, and it was also building the trust with the community. And children had their ownership while designing this, dreaming this, and putting it to the paper. We also saw the different patterns drawn by boys, which was more physical games like bat and ball, strategy games like kancha, which is a local game over there. Whereas girls, they were more pulling up social sports like rugby, hopscotch, and more beautiful items and dreams like flowers, trees, like colors in the surrounding area. So it was quite overwhelming and interesting for us to guide the design. So this is the result in design with the input from children, the open space. At first, we wanted to seal it, pave it. We saw that they want to play with sand and mud. So we had to even put a kacha area, means muddy area where children could play rather than sealing the entire open space. Similarly, we did some exercise with the women groups, and they came up with this design of community center, easily accessible, blended with local versus local traditional with the modern construction technology. They said it's a very hot area. We need sets where we can spend more time to discuss about our ideas, do a religious teaching, and also spend our time in the evening. So this is also a result of design in the community centers that we were engaging the community to come up with this kind of interactive design and the solutions. Some glimpse of the same community centers that was rebuilt. Now it's being extensively used by the entire community for multiple purpose. Um, when we try to find the place to design to implement this multi-purpose playground or multi-purpose recreational area, community pointed us to this stagnant water, which is like a ditch, and they were complaining that it was like a mosquito breeding ground. It was a trap for their children or animals, and it's full of water the entire seasons. So with community, we again filled it with a lot of sands, muds that was available nearby. Once we sealed it, and once it was filled, kids started playing in the ground with their tires. They were doing competition in terms of running race and many other things. And today you can see how that open space was developed together with children and the community members by planting trees, different plants, marking with the colors, and putting those kind of rebuils and other playthings that they were imagining. This is still the beginning. It will take months and years to make it part of the core of the settlements that they are designing. And we are starting this exercise from one settlement, and we have 50,000 settlement to raise. I would like to end my presentation here with the saying that recovery is not just about rebuilding homes. It's also about restoring dignity, culture, and hope. And we can always support communities, work with them with one resilient community at a time. Thank you very much. Over to you, Deborah.
Thank you so much, Minar. I just love the enthusiasm with which you speak, the conviction that you have about how important it is to have the communities participating in the decisions and in the implementation. It's just so inspiring. Thank you so much. And I see that some people are already starting to put questions in the Q&A, which is great. And so keep doing that as I turn to introduce our final amazing speaker. Anna Carolina Elena is an architect with experience in private, public, and humanitarian sectors. She is based in Luxembourg City with the Luxembourg Red Cross Shelter Research Unit, which supports construction projects in Africa, Ukraine, and Nepal. Her primary focus is on sustainable health promoting architecture and its environmental, socioeconomic, and public health co-benefits. Over to you.
Good morning, good afternoon to all. My name is Carolina, like Deborah mentioned. I currently work with the Luxembourg Red Cross, and today I will showcase a project we recently finished in Eastern Chad, in the refugee camps that are now welcoming the Sudanese that are leaving the conflict in Darfur. And more than results, I would like to showcase the ups and downs that we face as humanitarians, trying to implement beauty and more dignity in the shelter and settlement solutions that we co-design with the affected communities. My thesis for today is that beauty is not a nice to have, and it's a must. And I will try to convince you with my next slides. So to start with, I would just like to go through the meaning of beauty. I won't get into too much detail because philosophy has a complete branch, aesthetics, that is devoted to such discussion. But from personal and professional experience, I realized that we attach different meanings to beauty that could kind of be organized into different groups. One that I like to call objective beauty, so and also inherited, because it's linked to how we evolved as humans, and we can clearly see patterns that are witnessable all over the world in different cultures, and that are really linked to how our bodies and brains perceive the space. And I collected a couple of comments that I've heard in my different field missions in different countries, where people try to capture this idea that something is beautiful, but using different words. So, for example, for such type of what I would call objective or inherited beauty, proportion and symmetry is often mentioned through, for example, comments such as, this new shelter makes me feel protected and safer. So people cannot really identify what it is that makes like the design or the construction itself so pleasant, but they make such remarks. Then there are also comments that might redirect us to biophilic design. For those that don't know, if I try to encapsulate the concept in just a couple of words, it's the mimicry of nature. So we evolved in nature, so we tend to be reassured by copying such type of patterns, and also using, for example, such type of natural materials in construction in our designs, and an overall sense of harmony, symmetry, and proportion. But there's also another side to it that seems to be a little bit more subjective and acquired. That I divided in two big parts. So one is cultural preference, that is very linked to the social cultural soup in which each one of us grows and through which we experience life, and also personal taste, because I might have a favorite color, and I'm sure that many in the audience have another one different than mine. And in this case, there's space obviously for subjectivity, but I would say that beauty in such contexts, especially in complex ones like the humanitarian sectors, must have both. So beauty is not a nice to have. I hope I've convinced you of that. Beauty is a must. But the question is, how can we make this the norm, since our average refugee camps still look like this? So I'm taking a couple of pictures from refugee camps in Northern Africa. So generally they are endless copy-paste of the same standard emergency shelter that is not from scratch, like tailored to the local needs, nor the climate, nor the preferences of the affected populations. They are meant to last just a couple of months, years, when the protectiveness of the crisis nowadays makes that they end up being inhabited for much longer. And with this type of argument, is easy to shut down the question of beauty when we know that, in fact, we are just like avoiding the discussion. And there's also the challenge of being very top-down. So some designs are imposed in the communities, and often, I must say that there's a lot of effort right now to localize our response, and we are working in parallel with the communities more and more, but there are still a lot of top-down design, and there's very little space for personalization. And the sector itself also does not help, I would say, because there are so many misconceptions. There's this misconception that beauty will for sure cost more, when often it's just a matter of making better decisions when it comes to design and to material specification. There's also this idea that is very repeated, that beauty is just in the eye of the beholder. I would say the majority of architects and engineers that are now working in the humanitarian sector were shaped by university curricula that was made after Second World War in Europe, and that still has this idea that function should come before beauty, and we cannot have both often. So it's purely subjective, and with that we also shut down further discussion. We also have the often used one that we are saving lives, not building idyllic settlements. That's for later, when we are forgetting that there's this very close link between beauty and mental health that I will showcase later through the case study that I will present. And that we actually are running against time, and there's no time for such details. So this case study that I'm going to show to you is a project, actually a pilot project, a research project. So we just recently completed the testing phase, the first testing phase. So we built a short number of this new prototype in refugee camps in Eastern Chad, where we are already present and using standard models like the ones you have seen in the previous pictures. And this model was actually a response to a crisis that is growing. For those that don't know, since 2023, the war in Darfur was reignited, and Chad is receiving many refugee communities coming from this region, escaping the conflict. But on top of this, they also have a very hot and arid climate. It's hard to set up camps using standard shelters that use materials such as plastic tarpaulins that actually create saunas inside of the spaces that are terrible for living. The increase is very big, but the funding is very little. So we have less and less money per household to guarantee such type of proper shelter solutions, which again makes beauty very easy to dismiss. There's a lack of basic infrastructure. Well, to conclude, the setting by default is not an easy one to work with. And I'll just show you the video, if I can, of explaining how we created this shelter designed to be an evolutive one. So we understood that since the money was short, we had to create an option that would follow the households since their arrival in the camp through protectiveness. So this is an attempt to reuse all the materials that we use at emergency phase for later transition and development, as many of these camps become villages proper villages after a couple of years. And this is just a quick video showcasing how the model was designed. Okay, so now I will quickly go through such type of schemes for those amongst you that appreciate them. But my idea, and these are a couple of pictures, real life pictures from the camp. So this is the model at emergency phase, and later at the later stage when we have what we call the transitional walls that the families themselves build as they can using the local herd. So these are compressed herd blocks, and but my point is I would argue that this solution is much more dignified and beautiful than your average ones. But throughout the whole process, nor I nor the team ever mentioned beauty at any table where decisions were taken. So this project could happen. And today I brought two arguments on how we can sell beauty, even in such complex situations, using other convincing arguments through the co-benefits that beauty can have at human health level and also at the environment. So my first proposed solution to incorporate beauty as a standard, as a must in humanitarian construction is to sell beauty as a sustainable construction. And here are a couple of examples of this same case study. So we gave preference to bio-based materials, which we know we can link with biophilia and what I explained in the beginning. We do know that these materials do have a relaxing effect on people, and this is very important as this reduces the anxiety experienced by the communities that are often traumatized by their experience of war, of urban conflict, and the aftermath of natural disasters. But we can sell it as we are reducing the impact of the shelters by selecting better materials. The same can be done at procurement level. So we are using the compressed heart blocks that they have used, or if not used, they have used similar techniques in hurt that remind them of their houses in Sudan, and that people really appreciate and mention that this gives them hope. This reminds them of the life they had before and the life they can still have after their passage by the refugee camps. So again, like shorter procurement and supply chains can also be a way to beauty. And another solution, I think, that could also be a good one that could be a convincing argument for the decision makers is that beauty can also work as preventive healthcare. And in this case, I'm thinking about how beauty can impact positively mental health. So, for example, and these are examples that are no-cost examples. It's just mainly decisions, like I said, at design or material specification level. We tried that the facade looked like a face, so it could be easily recognized, and it's a symmetric design. It's a pure symmetric design. So we tried to incorporate biomorphia in such way, and also symmetry and complex symmetry that scientific evidence shows that humans overall tend to prefer and feel comforted and reassured by. And we also improved through the natural materials that we used, and that's come from the local craftsmanship, ventilation and passive control and thermal passive control, sorry, that we do know also that have a comforting effect on the body and overall help not just overall coping with overall trauma that such communities experience, but also can be a way to put health colleagues on board and explain that if you're spending at the built environment level, you might be saving when it comes to health interventions later on, and ensure like a more dignified experience for the refugees throughout the entire displacement. But for that, I would say to bridge theory with practice, and with this I end, we all have to participate. I would say humanitarian actors have a role to play. They should become the future lobbyists. They should learn because there's a lot of compiled evidence by researchers and academia on how beauty can also can actually have these measurable positive outcomes. we need to convince donors and governmental bodies with good case studies and also with good arguments based in that evidence. And affected communities have to be more invited to the table to also participate with such practical input to the overall design, so we can combine the objective and subjective nuance of it. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Carolina. That was an amazing wrap up of all three presentations in a way. Like, you brought the first view and then the practical experience into this conversation together. And for the people who have been asking questions in the chat, I really appreciate that. We do have about 6 minutes or so to get into it. We also have that 30-minute post-event coffee in the hall, if you will, that people can join. So I'm seeing questions specifically to individuals, like Carolina, somebody's asking whether or not you could potentially imagine this it being extended to Gaza. For the purpose of wrapping up this first part, this question and answer, I want to combine two questions that we received, one from Jean-Pierre and the other from Julia. Julia was asking, in a way, I'm going to paraphrase Julia, sorry, how significant is the impact of so-called bad space? Right? So like, do we really feel it? How strongly do we feel it? Right? And I want to extend that with also the question that Jean-Pierre said about talking about the redesign process in Pakistan, the tracing of grief to joy. So I'm going to ask each of you to talk about the significant impact, both in terms of physical and mental health, on a sense of dignity, a sense of feeling at home and hope. What is, like, if we have to do our best argument, right, for how to convince people why this matters, how do you answer that? So what? So is it a mild irritation? Does it, like, how do we measure the impact of non-beautiful spaces or spaces that don't have strong aesthetic, positive aesthetics in mind on the individual, on the community, on the process of being in displacement? I'm going to start with you in the same order. We'll go Don, Minar, and Anna, and take it from there.
Non-beauty is actually a stress environment. And, you know, that's what we're talking about here, is finding the patterns and the materials, the forms that generate pleasure. And it does, you know, as Carolina just pointed out, there's acquired and there's also inherited components to that. And the acquired is what Minar is talking about. You know, much of the local folklore tradition that generates a pleasure response. So beauty is such a word that's fraught with, you know, misunderstandings and emotion, and people, you know, want to dismiss it. You know, what I've learned is, let's use the word pleasure. Don't we want to create an environment that's pleasurable for the inhabitants? If we don't, and I'll wrap this answer up real quickly here, if we don't, there are catastrophic health ramifications to it that science is now learning. I think inflammation is an incredibly new field that is impacting human health understanding, and that leads to cancer and cardiovascular disease. And I mean, it frankly is catastrophic, and for architects to not be aware of it is malpractice. It's frankly so. Take it away, Minar.
Goosebump answer, Don. Over to you, Minar.
Thank you. That's quite interesting perception, as Don mentioned. I would like to go with a practical term that when we were with the communities, when they were building the house and creating their artwork, it is kind of a life inherent pattern where even we are in so much of stress. Once we achieve something, in order to mark those small happiness, like it's like we do celebration with our own. So I'll say all those artworks that we see on those walls are the celebration of the people that is always there, like our life. Second thing I would also like to say, apart from many things that we heard, is I'll always remember a 62-year-old when we were talking about like the art and the house that was being completed. He said at first it took me lifetime to build a house, not like permanent like this. So there used to be kind of bamboo mud semi mud house, and it's kind of a permanent house, and we could see small coloring and pattern. And then he said, this is the house that I was dreaming for, and I'm pretty much sure that this is not going to fall in next rain or flood, and this will exist for a lifetime. So we were translating by ourselves that whatever he marked in his walls is kind of his lifetime's achievement, and the relief that he got throughout his lifeline journey. So it was a very strong statement, and there are many thousands of those statements which clearly says that if it was just a dull structure in built environment without emotionally attached, without connecting it to the stories of life, it is lifeless. The structure is lifeless. It's a house. It's a four walls. We will enclose it, but we do not have any connections. And as Don was mentioning, from different way, it's not comforting us in every step of living. So here we see that beauty is must, and as Carolina was mentioning, we cannot compromise in terms of beauty because it's a lifeline. Over to Carolina.
I would add to what you two just said that we do know, I think we do know that the lack of beauty has an enormous impact on us. But we have a hard time conveying this idea to those that actually make decisions when it comes to what is built and how and when. So the decision makers, those that finance such type of endeavors. And we have this issue of translating evidence that is mainly still being solely discussed in academia and amongst researchers into practical advice for those that are actually working on the ground, and not just that in humanitarian sectors, but I see this as a challenge for many sectors. I don't think we are more advanced in the public or private sector, even in the so-called developed countries. And then I would also say that this is particularly hard to address in humanitarian sectors because majority of the evaluation of what we do is done by self-reported appreciation of the work we did. So the refugees are asked about, do you like it? And a yes is enough. So we never actually do proper research on such settings to prove, like we have done previously in other contexts, that there's actually a strong correlation between beauty and the outcomes in sustainability, health, overall sense of dignity and belonging to a community. So I think we have a challenge of translating qualitative data into quantitative data so we can have numbers that are convincing and compelling for decision makers. And then there's also a lot of work to do on the mental well-being part. I think for the physical part, we have a lot of studies already that can be extrapolated from developed countries' context easily to humanitarian settings. But when it comes to the mental aspect, And I think there's a lot to be done because, as I said, like there's a lot of trauma, a lot of anxiety to be dealt with in such camps. We don't have the studies yet to back it. But if I'm not mistaken, WHO recently added as a risk factor to depression, living in an urban environment. And my question is why? Maybe it's because we are not building beautifully, and that is the hidden cause why this is now considered a risk factor. But we have these type of challenges ahead.
Thank you, all three of you, for your really specific and generative answers. And I invite those of you who can to hop over onto the other Zoom link so we can continue the conversation. I mentioned, Stephanie just put it in the chat. I also mentioned quickly our next webinar final in the series is November 19th, where we're going to be looking at beauty as resistance, so taking a little bit from Minar's beauty and resistance, and it's about art, story, and healing forces in displacement. So thank you so much, and we're going to join over on the other, and everybody will receive the link to the recording following in the days to come. Thank you so much.